We knew her when she was in diapers. Alexis Cubit, Baylor graduate, covered Clemson. She's been all over the place, West Texas as well, and now covers Louisville for the Courier Journal Sports at ACC Media Days today. Alexis, I saw the video that was posted. Somebody asked a question behind you. You were in a theater area, whatever. And what was the question that got you that made you give that look?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say that I'm a writer for a reason, and they don't tell you that they pan out when they do these things. So you don't know that you're on camera as well as the person who's talking. So anyway, the question, he asked something about this whole realignment thing and just if the commissioner actually thinks that, what he wants to do as far as just kind of generating revenue is actually going to work, and that the Big Ten and the SEC is lapping financially to the ACC. And it was just, I was not ready for someone to just be so blunt and ask something so straight out. So it just kind of caught me off guard, and evidently so did the camera. So, yeah, my Twitter's been blowing up about that, and I've had people actually stop me here at the ACC Media Days and just tell me, I loved your video, or that was so funny. And I have 80 million new followers. I'm just like, okay, guys, I'm not really that entertaining, but I'll do my best.
What was who's the skater, the Ashley Wagner? Remember when she looked at she had that look on her face at the scores? That was your moment, Alexis.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, when you listen to Jim Phillips today talk about, where he feels the ACC is, how much of that do you think is propaganda, and how much of it do you think is actually true?
So that's the interesting thing. I was actually talking to someone about that, and I struggled because he was just so sincere. So I struggle with whether or not he's saying that just to put good faith out there, or whether he truly actually believes, these things. So kind of it remains to be seen on that. But I mean, he sold it well, because we're obviously having a conversation about whether or not he actually meant it. But he's new, so you have to factor that. I mean, he hasn't been on the job. I think it's been 18 months or something like that. So I mean, you want to try to put in as much good faith and belief as possible. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, everything boils down to the bottom dollar. So they're going to have to figure something out.
Alexis, just in the small talk going on around there amongst reporters and whatnot in between interviews, how much is what's going on, this current storyline of expansion or lack thereof and realignment, how much is that a part of the conversations out there at Media Days?
Oh, it's a lot of it. I mean, you look at every single coach that's got up, and that's been something. I talked to Scott Satterfield, Louisville's coach, about, they are doing something different because they're getting rid of the divisions. But, I mean, that's a big thing you have to think about, because if USC and UCLA can go to the Big Ten, clearly anything is possible as far as what schools go into what conferences. So that's definitely something in the back of their minds. And then the commissioner said something about having 17 teams in the conference, and so everyone was kind of jumping on that. It might have just been a Freudian slip, who knows? But I mean, it's definitely got everybody on the edge as far as what actually is going to happen. Can the ACC keep up? Can they close that revenue gap? And right now that just remains to be seen, because Notre Dame has absolutely no reason to join the ACC. But Jim Phillips seems to think that if they were to join somewhere, that it would be the ACC. They tried it out, obviously, in 2020 and ended up making the college football playoffs, if I'm not mistaken. But they were for sure in the ACC championship against Clemson, rather. So, I mean, it's an interesting thing, because you think, college football, there's so much more than just, playing a game. So, yeah, it's very, very interesting time.
You mentioned Notre Dame doesn't have to do anything, and that's one of the things we look at when it comes to the grant of rights with the ACC. I get the feeling that for some reason ESPN will do something. Nobody of major sources told me that. Maybe some sponsors. My question is, why would ESPN help the ACC?
That's a good question. That's a very good question that, still, again, remains to be seen. We spoke with Louisville's AD, Josh Hurd, who just, became the full-time AD recently, and he seems to think that, ESPN is looking out for the ACC and they have their best interest in mind. I mean, that's kind of what he said. And that was another tweet that, got out there and was kind of like, okay, but yeah, it's a lot is going on and changing. And, there's so much behind the scenes that we just don't really know about right now that, you just kind of have to wait on the edge and see what happens. But yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how all that transpires.
Do you think that some of the bigger brands like Clemson, Louisville, FSU, North Carolina, Virginia, right now, those bigger schools are kind of simmering and not letting anything out because they want to see where it goes, but behind the scenes they have to be pretty upset about the things that are going on around them?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that, as much as everybody loves to talk about tradition and, keeping their conferences and stuff, it boils down to money. Like, Clemson is a big, it's a big brand. And I think someone did an article with Steve Spurrier, and he said that Clemson was an SEC type school. So you could definitely see them joining. I remember last year there was a rumor out about FSU and Clemson going to the SEC right after OU and Texas did. I mean, so there is really no incentive anymore to stay in conferences just for the sake of being in a conference. It's about where you can make the most money. It's about where you can get the most exposure and be seen by recruits, get the best players, have the best teams. Right now, for a lot of teams, the Big Ten and the SEC seem to present those opportunities. So when you look at the schools that are in the ACC and, whether or not they have any real incentive other than the fact that they're going to have to pay a crap ton of money to get out their creative rights, there's really not a whole lot of incentive to stay in the conference, honestly. So I think that grant of rights goes through 2036, I want to say. So they're locked in for a long time. So it's not like they can move immediately. But I definitely think that's something that a lot of schools are going to have to think about moving forward.
Alexis, will you turn around to everybody behind you and tell them to shut up for a second? Just
is it too loud still?
It's pretty loud in the background. I didn't know. Okay. I know you're probably in a media area. Maybe even a get together afterwards as well. Okay, it's a little bit better now. Alexis Cubit covers Louisville for the Courier Journal Sports with us on Sikkim 365 Radio.
Alexis, you're on the Louisville beat now. You were on the Clemson beat. When OU and Texas jumped, what do you remember there being the reaction? And do you recall, were you on the Clemson beat when that happened, right?
Yeah,
okay.
That was last summer, yep.
Just in talking to folks around there, what do you remember that reaction being? And yes, the grant of rights is in place, so that would be hard to get out and whatnot. But did you gather a feeling, I guess is what I'm trying to get to, that there was a little bit of jealousy on the part of, let's say, a Clemson to see a move like that? Or do you get the feeling that they, like a Louisville, is content being ultimately in a conference like the ACC? Yeah,
well, the first thing when that came out was, in this day and age of Twitter where people just post anything, it's like, okay, this is clearly, someone trolling. Like, this is not really happening. And then when you see the more reports get confirmed, it's just like, oh, okay, all right, this is interesting, kind of different move. But yeah, no, I remember, I think we talked to Dabo about it last year, and he just basically said that, it's going to end up being like a Premier League type thing where you will have, basically super conferences and things like that. And that's just kind of the way that they're moving as far as, whether or not these teams would do that. It's been kind of hush-hush as far as that goes. And then there was a rumor, like I mentioned, that Clemson and FSU were going to jump to the SEC last year. Someone had put that out there, and obviously that wasn't true, but for how long, So, yeah, it's I definitely, like I said, I think it would be in their best interest for everyone to kind of look around and see the landscape and figure out how you can kind of survive. Because, you look at what happened with the quote-unquote the alliance with the Big Ten and the ACC and the Pac-12, and that didn't last very long. So, at the end of the day, you kind of have to look out for your school and what works best. But as far as, the bigger brands like Clemson and FSU, I think they'll be the next ones to watch.
So what's the story this year in your mind with Louisville? Obviously a kind of middle-of-the-road season last year. We're able to get into a bowl game, lost that bowl game, finished 6-7. Mm-hmm. What's kind of the I guess, Emma, or what's kind of the story, the summary of them right now heading into next season?
Yeah, so obviously the big thing is Malik Cunningham. It was actually kind of funny. He came in with a red suit today. It was very Lamar Jackson-esque from the Heisman night. So, a couple people asking questions about that. But I mean, his last year, he's obviously an amazing quarterback. Maybe doesn't get talked about as much as some of the other ones because of the records not being so great. But I think this year they have a lot to prove because part of what they said the past 2 years is just, COVID, and they had some injuries, but they've got their big players back, like their linebacker, Monty Montgomery, went out with an ACL deal last year. One of their corners, Keatrell Clark, went out with an ACL deal last year. They had a couple players with some ACL issues, but now they're back and they're healthy, so they're ready to go as far as that goes. They had some transfers come in in the DB room and the wide receivers. They have 3 running backs, so they've got all the pieces to be really good. The problem is that their schedule is unforgiving. It's a very, very tough backloaded schedule because if you look at the last 3 games, they go to Clemson and they host NC State, and then they're at Kentucky.
Yeah,
they haven't beaten Kentucky since Satterfield got there. Clemson hasn't lost a home game since 2016, if I recall correctly, like 34, 37 games straight that they've won at home. And then NC State is the favorite to win, well, one of the favorites to win the ACC. So you look at that, that's not easy. And then you got Pitt at home, so that shouldn't be, Pitt's still going to be good. You go to Boston College in October, which, who even knows what the weather's going to be in Boston in October. So their best bet is to try to stack up as many wins as possible during that early stretch where they go to Syracuse, they go to UCF, they get Florida State at home. Sorry, Paul. They got USF at home. So, I mean, if they can manage to go 4-0 during those first games, maybe get like catch a Pitt off guard or pick up a road win at Virginia, I think they'll be in good shape. But I mean, you've got just that last stretch is just really, really difficult. So, as much as they've improved and as much experience as they have back, I mean, it's going to be put to the test early and often with that schedule.
Alexis, to wrap it up, we appreciate your time, and it sounds a lot better now. Thank you very much for moving a little bit.
No problem.
What was the overall mood today? Was it tenuous, anxiety? Was it positive? Was it curious? What was the overall mood, you think, today in the ACC at the media days?
I think it was just very, very chaotic. And what I mean by chaotic is that there's just so much going on in college football. So there's just so much ground to cover, with the realignment and then with the dissolving of, the divisions for next year. And Jim Phillips said that was basically a move to kind of help out with the college football playoff situation where it's not, the top 2 teams in the divisions, but it's the top 2 teams in the overall conference. So if you have, 2 really good teams in a division, obviously they can't both make the ACC championship. So they feel like this model is a little more conducive, and they are advocating for an expanded college football playoff. So Commissioner Phillips talked about that, and it's just a lot going on, and a lot of movement, a lot of new coaches. And Virginia's got a new coach. It's just a lot going on. So a lot of tough topics to cover, a lot of ground to kind of try to get some quotes and things on. But yeah, it should be a very, very interesting football season, that's for sure.
Alexis, thank you. Appreciated what you did when you were interning with us a few years ago, and now love what you're doing. Congratulations on where you are and what you're doing. Congratulations. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, guys. I owe it all to you guys where I got my start.
We had a great time when she was at Baylor, and then, of course, covered some stuff. And went up north, was it Minnesota, Paul? And then went to West Texas, then covered Clemson, and now covering Louisville as well.
Wonder if she'd have a comment on the desert controversy.
I think Alexis would be very political about it, but I think there's a reason that she went to Clemson.
Yeah, we have not, and we